one fights alone.
Call of Duty World at War feels like a mod for Call of Duty 4. That sounds really negative, but that's actually not meant as a very negative thing. The game takes the engine from last year's game, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, and sends it back to World War II and makes a lot of updates and changes along the way. So you get this base of a really amazing first-person shooter with a bunch of new content thrown in. A lot of that content is really good. You get some good single player, you get the standard kind of multiplayer stuff that you'd expect based on last year's game. You also get co-op and some other neat doodads and tricks along the way too. The only real issue is that, you know, it's a solid game, but it kind of just made me want to play more Call of Duty 4. The campaign in World at War is told from two different perspectives. You get the American perspective in that you're running around with the Marines pushing back Japanese forces. You start kind of pushing them off of islands and eventually work your way all back the way back to Okinawa, and you're calling in airstrikes and taking over airfields and doing stuff along the way. The other half of the campaign is from the Russian perspective. The Germans have kind of pushed their way all the way into Stalingrad, and you know the Russians are not too into that. So you and some dudes are going to rise up, form the Red Army, and push them all the way back to Berlin, just like the real thing. The campaign is of a high quality, and it's broken up pretty nicely. There's a vehicle section or two in there, and you can also play this campaign cooperatively, which is new. You and up to 3 friends can get together and play, and you can set up a bunch of different things to kind of adjust the experience a little bit. The other co-op mode is a Nazi zombie mode, which doesn't necessarily fit in with the rest of the game, but it's what you get when you beat the game. It unlocks, and you can actually play this by yourself if you want to, but you won't do very well if you do. It's definitely meant for 4 players, and it's kind of just a weird little throwaway mode. There's really only one map, there's not a lot of variety to it, but it's kind of compelling. You basically are holding down the inside of a house, and there are zombies trying to get in who are also Nazis, and if they get to you, they kill you. So you're constantly trying to keep them out. They come in waves. By killing them, you earn money that you can use to spend on weapons to kind of keep the fight up and stuff like that. It's a neat diversion, but it is a diversion. It's definitely not the main part of the game. Then there's the multiplayer, the actual competitive multiplayer, and here you've got 13 maps to choose from, and basically you get a lot of the same modes that you found in Call of Duty 4, but you get a new mode like War, which is kind of a set of flags spread across a map, and you kind of push your way from one end to the other, so you constantly have people both trying to capture the same flag to kind of push in one direction or the other. It's kind of a neat change. It's a pretty good mode, but you know, headquarters. Dude, headquarters is still the mode. All the while, you'll be earning experience points when you're playing in public games, and these can be used to level up. As you level up, you'll unlock more weapons, and then as you use those weapons, you'll unlock things like suppressors or flash hiders for better stealth gameplay, you know, aperture sights and stuff like that. Call of Duty 4 had this same type stuff. Here you are seeing it from kind of the World War II perspective. It's a pretty good matchup of, you know, the same types of things. The real difference is when you get a 7-kill streak, instead of being able to call in a helicopter, now you call in dogs. That's pretty awesome because there's just a bunch of dogs that are, you know, running after the enemies, so you can kind of follow them to figure out where the bad guys are, and then if, you know, you're being attacked by dogs, you can stab them or something like that. It's a little gruesome. I expect at some point there's going to be a video of a guy stabbing a bunch of dogs that some dog lover is going to see and complain about it, but it's pretty cool. You can also configure your soldier for competitive multiplayer with different perks, and these have different types of effects that are pretty balanced. You can't really go too crazy in one direction or the other. Some of these return from last year's game, stuff like Juggernaut and Martyrdom, and then you also have vehicle perks. There are vehicles on the battlefield in 4 of the 13 maps that come with Call of Duty World at War, and they're tanks. So you can get in tanks and have a vehicle perk like, you know, better speed on the turret, or, you know, have the turrets cool down a little faster so you can fire more frequently and stuff like that. For my money, I prefer the maps that don't have the tanks. There's an increased player count in Call of Duty World at War compared to last year's game, but even when you fill up a game, the levels with the tanks just feel a little bit too big. I felt like I was kind of just seeking out the action more than actually engaging in the action on some of these maps, and that was kind of a downer. That's a your mileage may vary sort of thing, because if you're the type of person that likes to play the big objective-based maps, you're going to want, you know, these big flag maps, and you can lay down with a sniper rifle or something like that, and those big maps are definitely good for sniping. I don't like snipers, so not my thing. Probably the big thing that permeates all of Call of Duty World at War is fire. The flamethrower plays a very large role in the campaign. and it looks great. You know, you have unlimited ammo for it, but you can't really hold it down for too long or else it overheats and you have to wait for it to cool down. There are a few parts when you're playing on the American side where you kind of get the chance to stick it in a bunker and just blast everybody, and it just looks cool. The only downside is like when you're actually burning soldiers, that doesn't look quite as cool as it should, but you know, it works well enough. You can burn up some of the vegetation and stuff like that, so if there are like snipers in the trees, you can just, rather than looking up and shooting them, you just set the tree on fire and get them, which is kind of clever. If you play the multiplayer long enough, you can eventually unlock that flamethrower for use, but I suspect that it would only really come in handy on the smaller maps. So Call of Duty World at War is a very solid first-person shooter, pretty much across all of its modes. It's really hard to find too much fault with it other than, you know, it's just not quite as good as Call of Duty 4 was. There are definitely some aspects of it that are better, but maybe some aspects that are a little worse as well. Maybe it just comes down to personal taste, whether you have you know, whether you want to go in and play that kind of World War II themed first-person shooter or not, but, you know, I'd probably stick with last year's game.
Doing makes us harder, better, faster, stronger. Working harder, make it better. Do it faster, makes us stronger. More than ever, hour after hour. Work is never over. Our work is never over. No, no.
That is sick.
How are we from the other team? That sucks. Yo, you gotta get them to a party.
I know it's sick because I'm deadly, yeah, and you better watch out because I'm gonna rock you all.